a model of encouragement. To live in God's will, we are to remember in a special way those who have encouraged us. Here's Dr. Gene Getz.
As Paul concluded this letter to the Romans, he beautifully illustrated this principle. And notice he first mentioned Phoebe there in chapter 16 when he said this, I commend to you our sister Phoebe, who is a servant of the church in Cenchrea. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier in the principle, this is about probably 15 miles from Corinth. Phoebe was probably a deaconess because the word servant there really is the word that is used for deacon. She had an official position there in that church. And Paul goes on to say, so you should welcome her in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints and assist her in whatever matter she may require your help. And we believe that one of the reasons he said that is Phoebe was the one who took this letter, going all the way from Cenchrea, all the way to Rome. And that was a long way by ship and some by land, and delivered this letter to the church in Rome. And so Paul is saying, welcome her. Welcome her as a godly woman and help her in whatever way she needs your help. For indeed, she has been a benefactor of many and of me also. In other words, he's saying, Phoebe has really ministered to me and many other people. And then Paul went on to give special greetings to two other very, very special people, Priscilla and Aquila. Notice what he said. Verse 3, give my greetings to Prisca and Aquila, Priscilla and Aquila, my co-workers in Christ Jesus, who risked their own necks for my life. Wow. We really don't know that about this couple until Paul mentions it here. Not only do I thank them, but so do all the Gentile churches. Greet also the church that meets in their home. Now, here's the background quickly. Priscilla and Aquila left Rome because of persecution. That was their home. They probably had a huge home. They probably had servants, but there was persecution against Jews. And so they had to leave Rome. Probably left their home in charge of servants and went all the way to Corinth, a long way. And they were tent makers, a very prosperous trade, and that's where Paul met them. And he joined them initially as a tent maker to help put bread on his table because there weren't any believers in Corinth. And he led this couple to Christ. And they developed a tremendous relationship. Eventually, they traveled with Paul to Ephesus and ministered there. And then Paul left, and somewhere along the line, they went back to their home in Rome. Now they're back in their home because the persecution is no doubt over, and they could go back, take over their home that was kept up by their servants. And now the church is meeting in their home back in Rome. They're a wonderful couple. And notice it says they risked their lives for him, and they ministered in many other Gentile churches. Probably not only in Ephesus, but the churches of the book of Revelation, the churches of Asia that are mentioned there, those 7 churches, not just Ephesus, but the other churches that are mentioned. So this couple had a tremendous ministry. They were self-supported missionaries is really what they were, and they not only took care of themselves, but they took care of Paul on occasions and helped him in his own ministry. So we have this Priscilla and Aquila team, and Paul says, give my greetings to them. But then notice that he mentions another number of other people. I've just simply called this one in Christ. These were believers. And what we have here is a mix, really a mix of both Jews and Gentiles, rich and poor, men and women, marrieds and singles, leaders and followers, Christian ministries and regular vocations, people that served in both, government officials and civilians, and slaves and free. These were all the individuals, their different backgrounds, all one in Christ, and he greets them all by name. It's amazing. Here's another look at the categories, a specific breakdown of the groups of people. We have 3 married couples that are mentioned. We have 4 who are mentioned as sisters. We have 2 representing a mother and her son. 10 are women out of this list. 5 men appear to be a group of spiritual leaders. 2 groups represent whole households. At least 3 groups represent house churches in Rome. These were the groups of people. And so what I've done is I've broken it down into different categories to show you all the different people and different groups of people that ministered with Paul and who are now living in Rome and are worshiping in the house churches in Rome. And Paul wants them to know how much he loves them, how much he appreciates them for all they've done. And obviously they met somewhere along the line on his first, second, and third missionary journey. Now that's a powerful profile, I think, in relationship to this principle. And let me just restate that principle, and then I want to look at the applicational question. To live in God's will, we are to remember in a special way those who've encouraged us. And that's what Paul did. That's what Paul did. Now, here's the application question. Why is it so easy to take for granted those who have ministered to us in a special way? Boy, that's easy, isn't it? And I thought about that question myself, and I simply wrote down, first of all, we just forget. Life goes on. We take it for granted, and we just forget. I've been guilty of that. Or I know some people who simply say, I'm really sure you've heard this all the time, but I want to give you a word of encouragement. And the answer is no. I haven't heard that all the time. Somehow we assume that others are giving encouragement. And so we don't give encouragement. Now what happens when people respond that way? Very few people give encouragement because they think other people are doing it. That's another reason it doesn't happen. I think basically it's just something that is easy to neglect. And I know it is for me. I remember at one point in time in my own ministry, after having worked with a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary, where I taught, after I taught at Moody Bible Institute, came to Dallas. It was Dr. Howie Hendricks. The students called him Prof. Those of us who knew him well called him Howie. That was his nickname. And I had ministered with him for about 7 years at Dallas Seminary. He gave me tremendous freedom. I was his associate at the seminary. And it was this freedom that really led me to explore concepts of the church. And I wrote a book entitled Sharpening the Focus of the Church, and which led me out of the seminary to start churches, the Fellowship Bible churches in the Dallas area, which have spread literally throughout the United States and some overseas. And one day, I think it probably was related to this principle. And I was studying the scriptures, and I was convicted in terms of giving Prof. Howie, who, by the way, is now with Jesus, positive feedback. So I called him, and I said, Howie, Elaine and I would like to take you and Jean, his wife, out for dinner. And we took them to a very nice place. And as we sat down, I said to both of them, I said, I only have one thing on the agenda. Because they were wondering, what in the world was I going to talk about? Calling them out of the blue. The first time we had done that in years. And after I'd left the seminary, and I was in church planting, it was later. And I said, one thing on our agenda. I want to thank you for your encouragement. I want to thank you for believing in me. I want to thank you for the freedom that you gave me and you believed in me. That's it. Howie, Jane, thank you. And we ate. And you could see kind of a look on his face. And then he said, Jane, Elaine, you would be amazed at how few people that I built my life into for years have ever looked back over their shoulder and said, thank you. And I said, wow. I was so thrilled that we were able to give that word of encouragement. It meant a great deal. And then I developed another little technique, and that is I traveled a lot, and everywhere I went, I met former students of Dr. Howard Hendricks. And invariably, a number of them would say, wow, Dr. Hendricks, the prof, meant so much to me. Changed my life while I was there. And I said, have you ever told him that? And they thought, no, I really haven't. I said, do you want to tell him that? Well, yes. And I pulled out my cell phone and I dialed Howie Hendricks. I had a direct line. And that was after he was at home quite a bit. He was in the process of retirement. He had some physical issues. Gene would answer the phone. I said, Gene, this is Gene. Gene Getz. Oh, hi, Gene. Hey, is Howie there? Yes, he's right here. I said, could I talk to him? He got on the phone. I said, Howie, I just met someone who wanted to say something to you. And I'd usually give the name, so Howie would have the name. And I'd put him on the cell phone. And right then and there, I heard many of the former students say, I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I want to tell you how much you impacted my life as a professor. Some of them said, I should have told you that before, but I appreciate the opportunity to do so now. So let's, as we close out the book of Romans, not forget this principle to live by. Let me restate it, and hopefully it will grab our hearts, and maybe even this very moment you can think of someone with which you can practice this principle. To live in God's will, we are to remember in a special way those who have encouraged us.